Well, hello friends, this is David Vose. Hope you're all having a wonderful day. Well, I'm out here at the park, and I wanted to tell you guys a little story. It's a little windy out, but it's a beautiful day. Well, you know, I'd often wondered who created this phone, this computer. It was made by Apple, my phone, but it's not what I was trying to figure out. I mean, I knew it were, the company, but I mean, I've never met anybody in my life, in my entire life, that understood the entire workings, science behind this telephone or satellites, or I've seen people personally, my father, my stepfather, my uncle, many people that literally could tell you how an engine on a car ran. They could tear it apart. They could tell you how the gas entered into the chamber and explain combustion engines to you very, very perfectly. They understood the meaning of an engine. And, and I've talked to a lot of people that say, well, yeah, I know all about computers. I can build computers. See, all they're doing is they're buying computer chips, pieces of metal, screws, a box, a hard drive, stuff, all this stuff, a motherboard, and they're just screwing it all together. They're just physically putting together all the pieces, but they absolutely have no concept of how this computer works. And not only have I never seen anybody that does know how it works, I've never heard of anybody. I've never heard of it. So I decided one day to find out, how does a computer work and who can tell me? You can go to a book and you can look up one thing or another. Maybe you can look up computer chips and they'll tell you that it's encysted in light inside the computer chip. But who come up with that? How do they know that? What procedures and experimentations did they do? And what person somewhere in this world understands that so that they can take some sand, compress it into a little chip, go through all this experimentation and process, and come up with a computer? I mean, you see people that know how to program computers. Well, they don't know how to really. They can program a computer. They know how to write code, which is, right. It's kind of like learning a language. It can be done. It's a pretty complex language, but they don't know why or how the little symbols that they're putting into their black screen is somehow going in, and how that is going to somehow go through the fiber optics and go into the screen and manifest on the screen. They don't know how all these programs are working exactly. They're just basically maybe an expert in one field, but nobody seems to know what's going on. So I went to, and I checked it out. I figured that probably if I went to Apple Computers, I went to the front desk and I asked the lady there if she could show me or let me talk with somebody that really understood how they were making the computer, and tell me all about it and explain it to me, that she'd be able to do that. Well, what happened was she said, no, that was just a factory, and everybody there had a job. She didn't know how, because she was a secretary, and the guy on the assembly line, he just operated the machines. There were other people that operated other machines. Some people were putting in lines of code. They were trained to do this. But there wasn't anybody in that factory that understood how to build a computer from scratch, or the theories behind all of the different various parts of a computer. She said that she didn't know where I could go and I could find somebody that could actually explain it to me. But she said you might try somewhere at Microsoft or something. Maybe Bill Gates knows. Well, I went to Microsoft, and they let me talk to Bill Gates, and Bill Gates actually came in and sat down with me, and he said, yes, I'm the one who built this software that we're all running on our computers now. It's not the same as Apple, he was explaining to me, but it's a different software. And I said, okay, so you invented this. He said, well, no, not really. Computers were around when I was just a young man, and I was just messing around with some little code, and I figured out some little doohickey, and this particular little doohickey got me famous. So I hired people, and I hired this big factory, and we're buying all the parts from various companies and factories that make the various parts. Some of the factories I own, because I have a lot of money, and I want to make sure that I have most of the interest in all of these different parts and where they're coming from. We get a lot of our parts from Japan, and so I just buy the parts. I really don't know how a computer is built, and I'm Bill Gates. And I said, well, Bill, could you, being Bill Gates, could you at least tell me who in the world actually knows how to build and knows all of the theory behind, you know, there's got to be one person that understands not just how to smash sand and make a computer chip, or how to apply, you know, pixels to a screen, or whatever, something they learned in classroom. But there's got to be somebody, Bill, that literally knows and understands what this is all about. And he said, well, let me tell you, Dave, you got me now. You know, nobody's ever asked me this, but I've wondered this myself. And it's kind of like the king with no clothes, Dave. I just bought the company. See, I didn't invent all of this. I just invented one little piece of software, but I really didn't invent, you know, I had an idea, and some other people created it in the factory, and I made a bunch of money. But I've been interested in this myself, and so I did a little investigation, and it turns out that there are some individuals that when they came to me, I didn't even know who they were. But they basically gave me a sort of an outline or a mandate. They said, I want you to buy these parts from this place in China. There's going to be a factory that we're setting up in Japan that builds these other parts. Now, this is being coordinated by someone I don't know, Dave, Bill tells me. But each and every one of the parts is built and manufactured in a different country, so that nobody really has a complete understanding of what a computer is. If anybody ever got that understanding, they would rule the world. We can't give that information to even one country alone. Parts of this information Russia has, parts of it Japan has, parts of it China has. This is why we haven't had a world war for a long time. This is why we're controlling everything, because we're being controlled. You think I run this place, Bill says? No. I'm simply appointed as a little puppet head over this little factory here, and this company seems to have a logo on that everybody associates with me, but I really don't know what's going on. I said, well, Bill, let me go talk to these people that organizes all this for you. He says, listen, I don't really know where they're at because I couldn't ever really track them down. But you're welcome to go and try and see if you can find them. I would go to the President of the United States. Maybe he knows. Maybe one of the senators. So I said, okay, Bill, thanks. And I went to Washington, D.C., and I spent some time at the Capitol asking around, seeing if I could talk to some of the senators. I got a couple of senators that was able to speak with me. I even spoke to John McCain. John came out, and I asked him some of the same questions, and he basically just looked at me, started kind of shaking. His arm was just kind of shaking, you know. It sounded kind of strange the way he was talking to me, like he was mumbling, you know, and then he just like rushed out of the room like he was just scared out of his mind. I asked the lady at the desk there, you know, his secretary, and she said, oh, man, you know, his handlers, he's not allowed to talk about these subjects. He didn't know you wanted to, he didn't know you were going to ask that question. He cannot answer that question. So, because I said, well, you know, can you tell me? Do you know who these handlers are? And she said, oh, no. Nobody knows that. And he doesn't know. Nobody knows. He was just simply bought and paid for, and he's put into this position. He does what they tell him. I said, well, there's got to be somebody that knows who these people are, ma'am. She said, listen, I don't think any of the senators have any knowledge who has purchased them. They only get a little memo in the morning. They walk out to the Senate floor and they do what they're told. If they don't, they're fired. So none of them actually know what's going on. You might try the president and see if he knows. So I got a meeting with a Secretary of State. First of all, it took me about a week to get an interview with his secretary. She promised to let me talk with the Secretary of State, who said that he would be informed by the president, and if they could answer any of my questions, they would. As you might expect, the Secretary of State absolutely had no clue. He said, I was simply hired because I was a good speaker, and I really don't have any knowledge about who these handlers might be. About that time, the President of the United States walked through the door. Wow, it was amazing. An amazing feeling. I just felt so honored, you know, to be there with the President. And, of course, you know, the most powerful man in the world, you know, my hands were sweating, you know, and I was shaking, literally. And I got up out of the chair and walked over and shook his hand as he walked into the door. And he looked at me and he said, I hear you want to know who's really running the world. Who's building these computers and all this technology? And I said, yes, Mr. President, I really would like to know. He said, well, all I know is that there are some companies that have all of the power. And they hired me. I work for them. It's a company. And I took the job because I thought it would be better to get in there. At least I am there. And you know I got to do some things. You got to crack some eggs to make some omelets, but I'm doing the best I can, Dave. I hope you find your man, but all I know is you can go to these corporations. I think that they're the people that run the world. So I said, all right, who do you think I should go to? He said, well, I don't know. I got a lot of money from Google. Somebody there's got some power or some knowledge. I don't know, because they have a lot of money. They run all the satellites, you know, even the satellites that was supposed to be for our government. They're actually using them now. Facebook gave us a lot of money. Companies such as YouTube gave us quite a bit of financing. So you might go and start there. Well, I said, thank you very much, President. I'm so honored to meet you. And I walked out of the White House. Well, it was difficult. If you think it was difficult to go and find and speak with the president, you're probably thinking right now that maybe I am just lying to you and that I never really actually spoke to Bill Gates. And why would Bill Gates want to speak with me? Well, I don't know. I'm just telling you the story. And, you know, I'm sure you probably don't think I spoke to the senators, John McCain, but I really did. And you probably don't think that I actually spoke to the president, but I really did. And they really don't know. And he was a really nice guy. But this was hard. First, I had to find the headquarters to Google, and that was kind of difficult. They had several different headquarters for different operations in the world. The first one I went to evidently wasn't the highest #1 headquarters. They were only over certain technologies, departments, and so forth. They didn't seem to know anything. I finally made my way to a place. It was a large building. I think it was about 100 stories. I went up an elevator and actually wasn't even on the top floor. It was actually the 66th floor that I got off. and made my way into a small office, which I found out was simply a greeting room, and very few people were actually even invited to speak to this person. Well, as I went in to talk to the man, I told him about what the president had said and that he might have some idea, since he was heading up one of the largest companies and everybody today was running around with his phone and his applications, and I wanted to know if he could tell me who in this world is the person, the brain behind all of this, who's controlling the shots, who's hiring the president, who's running the show. And Mr. Google said, actually, Dave, my family is a very important, powerful family. A lot of people don't know this. I'm only 25 years old. I didn't create this business. Was actually appointed to this office. I have a cousin, a fourth cousin, who is actually right now running Facebook. And also the person that runs the YouTube department is also a relative of mine. And a lot of people, because of this, believe that we somehow run the world and know what we're doing. Dave, I want to explain to you something. I have no idea what I'm doing here. The guy that runs Facebook is 20 years old. He just got out of high school. He has absolutely no clue. Okay? We don't know, and I'm very, very sorry to tell you that we do not know. I said, well, I really appreciate for your honesty. Do you think it would do any good if I went and talked to Mr. Zuckerberg, or whatever his name was? He said, I don't think it's going to get you anywhere, because I know that he doesn't really know anything more than I do. I said, well, I'm glad that you've informed me, and I understand that it took a lot of courage for you to tell me this. And don't worry, I'm going to set the world straight, and I'm going to let them know you don't know a damn thing. And it's not your fault. And he says, thank you very much. I know you've got a YouTube channel. I hope you get this information out. I said, yes, sir, I will. Thank you. And I left the room. Went back down the long elevator. And on the way down, I was thinking, so if this large family who's appointed over these huge companies that are running the world don't know what's going on, I'm going to have to go up the line and talk to their family members, like their great-grandfather or something, if these young people that are running these businesses don't know. So I went to the phone book, and I started from there. That led me not very far. I ran into a friend that told me some information that led me to another piece of information, and finally I was on my way to Austria. When I got there, there was an old Gothic city, and it was a beautiful place. There was a nice little cobblestone road that led about, I'd say 5 miles from town. There was a beautiful ranch there with the beautiful horses, and I noticed that it was one of the most lovely ranches I'd seen in a long, long time. The trees were just all groomed, and everything was manicured. There was flowers, and it was just the most amazing, amazing thing. I was certain that I must be onto something. Whoever lived at this place must be important. As I rounded the hill, I noticed a huge castle. I mean, this castle was larger than the White House, the Kremlin, and, that building that houses Google combined, all made out of limestone. And there were gardeners, there were greeters, there were chauffeurs, there were chefs, there were all kinds of people working in some amazing, beautiful harmony. And they led me down a little yellow brick sidewalk all the way to the front castle door, and very graciously they took me into this beautiful hallway. I walked down the hallway. My legs were basically trembling. My knees were just, I felt like I was going to fall down. I couldn't hardly breathe. What in the world was I getting myself into? This man, whoever it was, must be the most evil person on the face of the earth if he could run all of the world. So I went down the hall, turned left, at this small intersection that was a very narrow passageway. It led to a huge office. They ushered me into the office, and I sat down in a plush couch, and I awaited this man that at this time I had no idea who I was going to meet. After they brought me some tea and some cookies, and I had a real nice time playing Parcheesi with the entertainer, because they actually sent somebody in there to talk to me because it was going to be a wait. This man was a very powerful man. He had things to do, and he really didn't have time to talk to me. But very graciously, he did try to make a little bit of room for me that afternoon. So while I was waiting for him, I got a chance to talk to some people there, some very nice people, and I asked them if they knew anything about it, and they said, of course not. They were just, you know, hired hands. They didn't know who this, you know, what this man, what his powers were. They didn't know anything. So finally, the door opened, and there he stood. The man that ran everything, I thought. And I stood up and walked over to him. I realized I still had my tea in my hand, so I went back over to the table and set down my teacup, and then went back over and sort of bowed and nervously said, "Hello, I've come to find out, are you the one? Are you the one who runs the world?" And he said, "Actually, no, I'm not. I don't run the world. That's a really good question. I would love to answer that question for you, but if I did, you wouldn't believe me." I said, "Well, sir, at this point, after having spoken to all of the people, Bill Gates and the president and Mr. Zuckerberg and all of the other very powerful people in the world, I think yes, I think I would believe you if you just would tell me the truth." And he says, "Well, there's another family that is much more powerful than our family, and I will not be able to introduce you because he's a very busy man, but I'm going to do something because I have a good feeling about you. I have a really good feeling about you, and I think that you really have spent a lot of effort and time trying to find out this answer. And I think it's important that you find out. So I'm gonna help you out." So he went over to the desk, and sitting right on the corner of this huge desk where I suspected he always sat, there was a box. It was a very ornamented wooden box. He opened it very carefully, and he pulled out a key. And he took the key, and he walked very carefully over to me, and he said, "Now open your hand, young man." And I opened my hand, and he placed the key inside of that sweaty palm of mine, and he closed it, and he said, "This is the key. This is the key to it all. And I'm going to give you instructions and a map, and you'll follow the instructions carefully." I said, "Yes, sir, I will. Thank you. I appreciate it so very much." He said, "I'm going to send some people along to help you, and you're going to find what you're looking for, young man, and I want you to find it, and I want the secret to finally be revealed. So off you go, and when you find out, please tell the world on your YouTube channel." And I said, "Yes, sir, I will. Yes, sir, I will." And I said, "First of all, before I go, I didn't catch your name. What is your name?" He says, "I am Mr. Rothschild." I said, "Oh my goodness, it's such an honor to meet you, Mr. Rothschild. But I was told that you were evil." And he said, "Well, not really evil. I really just don't have any clue as to what's really going on. All I know is that I was told that you would come and you would arrive, and to give you this key. Now off you go, and make sure you remember to tell them about me. I said, yes, I will, sir. So I went out, and the whole thing really sounded quite familiar to me, but I just went with it at this point. So I walked out onto the lawn in the front of this building and walked down these lavish steps, and following me there was a lion, and right beside him was a scarecrow, and on his left was a Tin Man. I sat down in a chair that they had shoved up basically right underneath of me as they hurriedly took off my dirty shoes and placed these red sneakers on my feet, for they said the journey would be a long one. I would have to find what I was looking for at the end of the yellow brick road. And so it was kind of strange, but we jumped up and started singing a song. It was an amazing thing, because it was almost as if I had heard that song before. But we were off to see the wizard, the wonderful Wizard of Oz. I don't need to tell you all that this was an amazing journey. At this point, everything seemed surreal. I don't know if anything that was actually happening was real. We found a witch along the road who was very evil and had a terrible cackle. She wore a black hat, and there were flying monkeys. They really didn't like me. But it was at that point that I finally realized why I had even come this far. Because as I was about to be killed and murdered by a pack of monkeys, there was a beautiful, beautiful, what looked to be an angel, but she said she was a good witch. She had beautiful blonde hair and beautiful wings. And this is what she said. She said, "Follow me. I'm going to take you to Oz, the king of the world. He runs it all. Now just click your red tennis shoes together." And as I did that, we were there. And we were in this room, and there was this large curtain. And then she said, "Pull back the curtain." And that's when we saw who ran the world. They pulled back the curtain, and much to my surprise was this little fat midget who was in the process of eating a large pizza and smoking a cigar. I said, "Mr. Oz, are you the one who runs the world?" And he said, "Of course not, you idiot. Do you think all these people were telling you the truth? Now, be gone with you, and click your red tennis shoes 3 times, and you'll be back in Kansas." And sure enough, there came down out of the sky a really huge balloon, and another old man, another fat old man, that I thought I recognized for a minute, but then I thought, nah. But I got in this balloon with this guy. I don't know why, but we just sailed off into the sea. And now, here I am telling you my experience, and I hope you guys appreciate all the work that I went through to try and find the actual people who run the world. So, now you know. This here is David Vose. I'll see you guys again tomorrow. Have a good day.